Good evening, everybody. Today was visiting day in camp. I'm a concerned parent. Right, I was there, and and whatever. The traffic and was unbearable, and lost GPS signal. I guess that's a sign. Maybe we also have lost our GPS and our sense of direction. Really, something to you always have to learn from whatever befalls you. Tonight ushers in the Yom Tov of Tu B'Av. It's sadly because people are recovering from the 3 weeks and rushing off to the country. This holiday doesn't get its proper attention that it's due. I mean, the Gemara says at the end of Tanis, it's Lo Yom Tov L'Yisrael Ki Yom HaKippurim v'Tu B'Av. These are the 2 happiest days of the year. Tu B'Av that comes in tonight, and Yom Kippur. 2 happiest days. For reasons that we'll explain in a second. But there was an interesting custom that on these 2 days, the maidens of Yerushalayim used to wear white and do some type of a dance in the vineyards, and anyone who did not have a wife, would go there, to find a shidduch. So it's very interesting as to why this is. These 2 days they had this custom. So the understanding the simcha, and why it's a day of shidduchim, Tu B'Av. So the Gemara says a few things happen on this day. So one of the things that happened was that just a few weeks ago we read in Parshat HaShavua the whole story of Bnot Tzlafchad. They wanted to take their father's inheritance because he did not leave a male descendant. Okay, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu said that they're right and they deserve that inheritance. So in the next week's parsha, so the people from their tribe said, listen, if they're going to now marry men from another tribe, so our resources of Shevet Yosef are going to go, out of Shevet Yosef, and it's going to become part of the Nachala of a different Shevet. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, that's right, so the Bnot Tzlafchad have to marry within their own tribe. And it was understood that that should be the halacha, that women have to marry within their own tribe, so as, in the event that they're the heirs for a nachala, it shouldn't go from shevet to shevet, and that was considered to be the normative halacha. And on the day of Tu B'Av, I don't know which year, but it doesn't say, but on the day of Tu B'Av, they found a source to prove that was a special injunction for that generation alone, but in subsequent generations, Hutru Ashvatim Lavo Zebazet, the tribes are allowed to marry with each other. Which I guess that already raises a connection to why it's a day of Shidduchim. But then there's another interesting halacha regarding Shidduch. Everyone knows the tragic story that happened in the days of the judges, of Pilegesh Begiva. A concubine was taken forcibly, and it caused a civil war between Shevet Binyamin and the other Shvatim, and they excommunicate Shevet Binyamin that we don't marry with Shevet Binyamin, and that was thought to be the halacha forever until on a Tu B'Av in 1 year they found a source to prove that again that was only supposed to be temporary, it was not going to be forever. So 2 interesting halachas that got overturned on Tu B'Av, both having to do with shidduchim, and then another 2 things that the Gemara tells us happened that don't. It's hard to see the common denominator with the first that we just mentioned. Is that Yeravam ben Nevat, the one who seceded from the kingdom of Judah and caused Am Yisrael to splinter into 2 kingdoms, Yehuda and Yisrael. Yeravam ben Nevat set up roadblocks to stop people from going on Aliyah L'Regel. Right? On this day of Tu B'Av, a later king of Israel, Hoshea, he abolished the roadblocks. Right? The Hoshea ben Elah was Mevatel the Prostiyot, Shoshiv Yeravam ben Nevat, and he gave people a choice. Now it's your choice whether you want to serve whatever avodah zarah they were serving in the kingdom of Israel, but you're free to go Aliyah L'Regel also. And that happened on a Tu B'Av. And the last thing, to the best of my memory, that Chazal count happened on Tu B'Av was that they discovered that everyone knows from the stories of Churban HaBayit, the terrible tragedy that Beitar, like an amazing amount of people were murdered there. As the Gemara tells us in Gittin. So on Tu B'Av, the Gemara in Taanis tells us, they discovered that all those people murdered, not only did they not decompose, but subsequently they were zocha lekvura. They had an honorable burial. An amazing thing, right? That even though they were massacred, they were zocha hatov, and with that Chazal instituted the bracha of hatov v'ametiv that we have at the end of benching, the fourth bracha of Birkat HaMazon, right? Kel hatov v'ametiv hakol, right? It's after Bonei Yerushalayim that got instituted, that bracha, and we also make a short version of it on if hearing good news. Right, good, you get something good, like let's say Yerusha that you're going to share with a few people, or having a male child, right? Or trading up wine. You go from a wine that's okay, right? And you haven't finished the bottle yet, but you're trading up to a better wine. In all those instances, you make ha'atov v'ha'metiv. God is good and does good, and that was all instituted in response to the miracle that they saw, that the Haruge Beitar lo hisrichu v'nitnu lekvura, they did not decompose, and they were also given over, they were zocha to burial. An amazing thing, that for that reason, Chazal were metakin the bracha v'atov v'ametiv, which we make on unbelievable joy. The Gemara tells us that in this world, there are times we say, Baruch Dayan HaEmet, when things don't go the way we want, right? But in the next world, in the world that's Kulo Tov, in Olam Haba, it's only Hatov v'ametiv. That bracha got instituted on Tu B'Av, but in response to seemingly, a strange event, right, that the Haruge Beitar lo hisrichu v'nitnu lekvura, and we just have to understand why they saw tremendous joy in that, and that all has to fit with abolishing the roadblocks to go to Harabait for Aliyah L'Rego, and, again, overturning the two halachot that kept, Shevet Binyamin separate from the rest of tribes of Israel, or the earlier halacha of keeping all tribes separate, that they're not allowed to intermarry with each other. Okay, so I want to raise a question. All right, in the first 2 out of 4, so he said that they found sources to overturn the halacha of the tribes not intermarrying, and they found a source to overturn the halacha of Shevet Binyamin not marrying with the other tribes. Now I can understand. All right, the Shevet Binyamin was they were being fined, they were being punished because of their role in the civil war. I get it. All right, so and then we decided that the punishment is it shouldn't be for all generations. I got it, but the first case, right, that's biblical. God himself said to the Benot Tzlafchad, they're not allowed to marry into other tribes. And then, you have to, sometime later, different time, different place, they found on Tu B'Av a way to overturn that. And now the Shvatim can intermarry. Right? Why was the Torah set up that way? That, keep separate, and then you have to find a source to bring it together. Matter of fact, what do we need the whole tribe business to begin with, right? You divide up, a nation. They just got liberated from slavery into 12 tribes, right? And they were very makpid on that in the desert, right? That as you know, from multiple parshas in the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu goes through the lineage of, the different tribes, which mishpacha came from which shevet, and each shevet is counted separately, and not only that, they're camped around the Mishkan separately, by the Degalim. There were 4 groups of 3 camped around the Mishkan, each one with their own flag. What are you doing that to the people for? Right? They've been in slavery for 210 years. They probably forgot, if not for the fact that they were reminded. Right? They probably forgot which tribe they were from. All right, and then Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron, set up everyone's yichus, right, to make sure everyone remembers what tribe they're on, and they bring back tribalism. Why do you want to bring tribalism? Why do you want that? All right, and tribalism, and then you're happy that subsequently later you find a way to, walk it back so they could marry with each other. Don't set up the tribalism to begin with. So, there is one more thing that I neglected to mention, and it's also counts as one of the happy things that happened, on this day. You know that after the sin of the spies, which is the thing that thrust us into the whole idea of Tisha B'Av, the spies that came back and spoke back bad about Eretz Yisrael, they came back on Erev Tisha B'Av, Vayilonu am ba'alayla hu, and they cried all that night. That night was Tisha B'Av night. God says, Atem b'chitem b'chiyah shel chinam, ani ikvalchem b'chiyah lidorot. You cried for nothing. I'm going to give you something to cry for all generations. And that laid down the precedent of Tisha B'Av. That generation already laid down like the crack. That Tisha B'Av is a day that bad things are prone to happen on. All right? So everyone knows that the direct decree that came as a result of that sin was that whole generation has to die in the desert. All right? For 40 years, that's why they had to move around for 40 years, ad tom kol adorahu, until that whole generation ceased to exist, and the next generation could go into the land of Israel. All right? So Gemara says that on Tu B'Av, they stopped dying, meaning the actual, they understood that the 40 years were up, right? That on Tu B'Av they stopped dying. Tosfos explains by bringing some midrashim that what does that mean? You know what they did? Tosfos brings, based on midrashim, that every year on Tisha B'Av, they dug their graves and they went to sleep, right? And that's how it happened, right? The ones that woke up in the morning, were the ones that had another year to live, and the ones that didn't wake up, so like Tisha B'Av, the anniversary of when they did the sin, was the day that a whole nother level was whacked off. And that's how it happened gradually over 40 years. Every Tisha B'Av, they dug their graves. The people of that generation went to see, you saw who woke up the next morning, who got another year of life. So came one year, everyone woke up. Okay, so they thought they must have made a mistake, with the date. All right? So they went back to sleep in their graves the next night. Everyone woke up. All right, so they thought there must have been a mistake. Until they saw the full moon, which is on Tu B'Av, they realized they didn't make a mistake. The Gzeirah is over. All right, and that's one of the things also that we're happy about on Tu B'Av. Now, it's very, very interesting, right, that Chazal, that generation viewed it as if the decree was like overturned on Tu B'Av. Why overturned? Look, it was for 40 years. It expired. It just wore out. There's a Yom Shekolu Meisei Midbar. It's a day that they stopped dying. Well, they stopped dying. It was for 40 years. They went through the 40 years. Time's up. They view it as if it was overturned. So, everyone knows that in the future, the Beit HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt on Tisha B'Av. All right, so now, that means that when, if let's say the Beit HaMikdash is open for business, first day is Tisha B'Av. So now we celebrate. We celebrate for 7 days, Shivat Yemei Mishteh. So the 9th, the 10th, the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, the 15th. Comes out that the 15th of Av is destined to be the day that we finish, the 7 days of inaugurating the third Beit HaMikdash Bimhera B'Yameinu. Right? So now that's what the Mishnah says, that even back on Tu B'Av, the woman used to sing, Tzura, the Pasuk of Shir Shem, Tzura Ba'atar Shitra Lo Imo. See, the King Shlomo, the crown that his mother gave him, B'yom Chatunato, U'b'yom Simchat Libo. B'yom Chatunato was Yom Kippur. All right? The days of marriage refers to Yom Kippur. The giving of the Torah, when the Torah was given to us after we were forgiven for the sin of the golden calf, which is what ushers in the 3 weeks. Right? We got the second Luchot on Yom Kippur. U'b'yom Simchat Libo, Zeu Binyan Beit HaMikdash, which, mean the finality of celebrating the rebuilding of the temple, right? It'll hit its high point on the 15th of Av, Bimhera B'Yameinu. So the question is like this: why is it apropos? And that's why everyone knows we didn't say Tachanun on Tisha B'Av, because it's going to be a Yom Tov. Why should it be a Yom Tov? It's a terrible day. You should think that we'd want to put the rebuilding of the temple on the opposite side of the calendar to not have it like associated in any way, no bad memories, because this day where 2 temples were destroyed. And we say, no. This is going to be the time when the temple is rebuilt and the festivities reach their grand finale on Tu B'Av. Right? The question I'm raising really falls in line with the idea that they viewed it that on Tu B'Av people stopped dying from the chet of the Meraglim, right? On Tu B'Av, right, they instituted the Bracha Batov V'Ametiv because the Haruge Beitar didn't decompose and got Kvura. It's sort of like bittersweet, seeing the sweet in the bitter. It's something to think about. But the truth is like this. Right, imagine if the Meraglim came back and the people would have not listened to the 10 guys who were bad-mouthing Eretz Yisrael. They would have listened to Yoshua and Kalev. What would have happened? Right? Alternate timeline. Right? Which is what they should have done. They shouldn't have received, bin Mekabel Lashon Hara. They should have listened to Kalev and Yoshua. What would have happened on Tisha B'Av? Would have gone into Eretz Yisrael with Moshe Rabbeinu. And that was the original plan. That was the design. I mean, Kadosh Baruch Hu wasn't banking on us listening to the Lashon Hara of the Meraglim. He was banking on us being good and listening to the people who were telling the truth. Right? So that means by design, Av was supposed to be the happiest month of the year. That's the way God wired it up. That if things would have gone according to plan, would have gone to Eretz Yisrael with Moshe Rabbeinu on Tisha B'Av. The very next day, we would have gone in. Right? Means that Av, by the way God created the months and the mazalot that God set up, Av is supposed to be a good month. Right? So now there's a very interesting, everyone's heard of the Sefer Yetzirah. The Sefer Yetzirah talks about, sets up how all the 12 months of the year are parallel to the 12 letters of the Aleph Bet that do not have a dagesh, right? The Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, etc. So without getting into all the details, what concerns me is the month of Av. It says about the month of Av, Himlich Ot Tet B'Shmiyah. That the month of Av, what reigns, the power that reigns is the letter Tet in hearing. What does that mean? Letter Tet in hearing. So Rav Tzadok HaKohen Milublin, points out a Gemara in Baba Kama. The Gemara in Baba Kama says if a person dreams and sees a letter Tet in his dream, so before you go to bed tonight, think Tet, 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 right? Because a person sees a siman, a letter Tet in his dream, siman yafeulo, it's a good sign. Because the first time we find the letter Tet in the Torah is in the word Tov. In the words, Vayarokim et ha'or kitov. That's the first time you have the letter Tet. Letter Tet was not in the Torah prior to that. The first time the letter Tet appears in the Torah scroll is by the word Tov. And since the Torah opened up with it with goodness, that means Tet is good. So if you see the letter Tet in your dream, you're good. Right, literally, you're good. All right. So now, that pasuk, Vayarokim et ha'or kitov, what's that talking about? What does Rashi say there? Rashi says that light was like really good. That was the or that it's not befitting for the Rishaim to enjoy that or. So it says, meaning that Vayavdel Elokim ben or ben achar, he separates from the light and the darkness. He put that light in Genizah. That's the Or HaGanuz. That's the hidden light. That's the light of the future, what we pray for. Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir. Right? There should be a new light. All these prayers about the new light. We're talking about this very, very beautiful light that was so beautiful that God wanted to save it for the future, so the Rishaim should not enjoy it in this world. That's what that letter Tet refers to. This or that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put, it's the Or HaGanuz, which is the real goodness that we're waiting to have revealed to us in the future. Right? So this real light that's now Ganuz, what's our connection to it? It's hidden, right? It's like too good for this world because we don't want the Rishaim to enjoy it. So what's our connection to it? You can't see it. So you hear about it, like I'm telling you about it. Right? Right? Chazal tell us about it. Right? And that's what it means, says Rav Tzadok HaKohen, Himlich ot tet b'shmiya. It's the light that's too good to see. You can only hear about it. How God has, it's being promised to you for the future. Right? the Chodesh of Av was meant to be like the most glorious month on the calendar. Now, what's right now the most glorious month on the calendar? There's 2 months that are pretty good. Adar and Nisan. As a matter of fact, it's right here in this Gemara also that says that just like Mishenichnas Av b'ma'atim b'simcha, Mishenichnas Adar marbim b'simcha. Now it's very interesting that the two are coined together. It's the same halacha. Just like when Av comes in, you have to mitigate your simcha up to Tisha B'Av. So also when Adar comes in, you have to increase your simcha. They're coined. They're mentioned the same. Right? And Mishenichnas Adar marbim b'simcha. Rashi says it's not just because of Purim. It's because of Purim and Pesach. Rashi says. Because Adar is just, it's just goodness, straight through Nisan. Now the truth is, when Haman threw the lots, right, he was happy, right? Came out on Adar, he was overjoyed, Gemara tells us, because he thought it's our bad month, right? Because Moshe Rabbeinu died in Adar, right? And, Adar, Dagim, fish get swallowed. I'm going to swallow them, right? I'm going to swallow them. All right? Was he right or was he wrong? Haman. Wrong. Really? Yeah. Come on. Let's compromise. He was right initially, and then he was wrong. Because the Megillah says there was right? The month changed. The truth is like this. Right? Adar was really a bad month for us at the time that Haman threw the lots. Right? But we did tshuva me'ava, and with the power of tshuva, we rewired Adar, right? But that type of tikkun that we did for Adar is the type of damage we did to Av. And that's why the two are coined together. That just like Misha Nichnas Amatim B'Simcha, it's your fault. You made the mazel of the month bad, and that's why you don't wait for Tisha B'Av, for the Avilut. You might B'Simcha from the minute the mazel starts because you wired it, to be a bad month. Right? But also Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha, because we're the ones, we don't have to wait for Purim. The Simcha starts immediately with the mazel of the month because we made it a good month. Right? So Av was supposed to be a great month. We're the ones who made it bad. Now Adar is a good month because we made it good. But then there's a month that was good because God made it good. That's Nisan. Right? The Geula. Right? God took us out, we weren't worthy of it, but he decided that's the month of the Geula, right? And that and there's a shita in the Gemara, B'Nisan Nigalu, B'Nisan Atidin Ligael, right? We are destined to be redeemed again in the month of Nisan. God made that a good month. So Nisan is Chodesh Aviv, right? So now I heard from my Rebbe, Moshe Shapiro, Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh L'Vracha, right? That in Lashon HaKodesh, whenever you double the last letter, that means small. Like katan is small. Ktantan, that's very small. That which we call in Avodah Zarah a Elilim. We're actually making fun of little God. It's Kel, right? God, right? Elil, Ketchko, right? Little God. We're making fun of it, right? So, once you have that in mind, what does Aviv mean? Nisan Chodesh Aviv. What? So it means the spring, but now I said when you double the last letter, it means small. It means Nisan was little Av. Av was supposed to make Nisan look small by comparison. It's supposed to be an unbelievable month, right? The month that's like, almost too good to have in this world. And that's why there's a challenge. The Gemara says in Brachot, that givum matanot tova natan chashul yisrael v'kulam lo natanam ela ayidei yisurim. There are 3 good gifts that God gave us, but He gave it through pain, right? And that's Torah, Eretz Yisrael, and Olam Haba. These are 3 things that these are the best gifts that God gave us, and it's not easy. It's not easy, right? Torah learning, that's hard. It's not easy, right? Eretz Yisrael, never been easy. Right, to acquire the conquest, the living, the surviving, right, and to earn Olam Haba. So says the Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Lutzato, says, why Yisurim? Like, just, make it the perfect present that not only that is it good, but it's easy. Said, no, right? This is like so good that, it's an acquired taste. It's like the stuff that's really good. Small goodness, even a child could appreciate. Things that are sweet, Things that have sweet little nothings. What's really, really, really good, you have to build up a taste for it, build up a capacity to contain it. Right? This is like super good. And that's why you need the Yisurim, right? Which means two things. First of all, because it's so good, it's higher than what you could comprehend. And when you don't appreciate what's going on, because you don't understand it, that's called painful. We don't know what's going on. But it's also from you got to build up you got to refine your eyes, refine your tastes to appreciate it. Something that's really good is an acquired taste. The stuff that's simple, that's stuff that anyone can appreciate. The sophisticated things are acquired taste, we know. And certainly much so, Torah, Eretz Yisrael, and Olam Haba. And the month of Av is like that also. And that's why there's a big challenge. Like the Meraglim came, 10 out of 12 didn't know how to appreciate Eretz Yisrael. They know how to appreciate what they saw, right? Only Kalev and Yoshua had, they had bigger perceptions, and it didn't come to them easily. Moshe Rabbeinu davened for Yoshua, as you know, and added a letter to his name. Kalev, he made a detour to daven at Marat HaMachpelah. Right? They had special help to appreciate what they were seeing, right? Things are so good, right? That's such good that you can't easily see and appreciate. You just hear about it. I inform you that it's good, but that you should see it and you should feel it takes a lot of work, right? That's the challenge that we face, right? Sometimes when things are so good, if you don't know how to appreciate it, it feels terrible. Like the first time you had your dry red wine. You guys drink dry red, right? Right? What was it like the first time? Right? Right? No, first time. Right? Yeah? Well, good for you. Right? No. Most people are not like that. Till you refine and you learn. Right? Same thing with Torah. The Torah is called like wine, and I'm not just saying that because Hatov V'Ameitiv that we're talking about is a bracha that you make on wine when you start trading up. Right? Torah, when you first start learning how to learn, it's hell. Right? It's really, really hard. Right? Until once you learn, as we call in Yeshiva, knowing how to learn, and you know not just how to translate, but you know how to infer and how to make sense, it's unbelievable. Right? But it's work. It's work to acquire. Ruchaniyut, right? Right? Anything that's spiritual, that's not a base physical pleasure, it takes, it's an acquired taste. Right? Right? And so, but everything that the month of Av has to offer is an acquired taste. Right? And if you acquire a taste for it, it's unbelievable. And we're not going to have a full taste for it until the future. But you can understand that, that's why, when something is so good that you don't know how to appreciate it, it could easily feel like the worst thing. Because you don't know how to appreciate it. If you don't know how to appreciate it, you could actually, rebel against and say you don't want it, like they did with Eretz Yisrael. And, that's very much the, when you really think about it, right? What makes something special, right? What makes something special is that it has this unique definition. Now, so I'll tell you something very interesting, right? To define something, what do you mean to define something? It means, it's within these parameters, right? Whether this is its shape, this is its color, this is how you describe it, any other description would be false. You know what that's called? And speaking a little bit philosophically, that's called din, judgment. They say it's like this, but it's not like that. Right? Yeah, that happened to me today. Happened to me all day. Right? Like I say, it's a sign from heaven. Have we lost our GPS to learning about appreciation and sense of direction? Right? Right? That's din. Right, to legislate that it's like this, and this is its definition. In Chesed, there's no distinctions in Chesed. You give to everyone equally whether they deserve it or not. In Din, there's distinction. If there's such a thing as colors and differences, variety, that's in Din, not in Chesed. Chesed doesn't know distinctions, right? That's the problem with, where equality, sometimes goes awry, right? That nothing is special and nothing is unique, right? So you have to give equal rights, but not, make everything the same. The same is, everything loses its speciality, right? That's the big gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us, right? That He made things different from each other. We have a wonderful world, a lot of shapes and colors, right? and that's part. And of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does everything for our good, and that's part of the goodness. And that's really, we said the acquired taste is the stuff that's really, really good, right? Chesed is easy to appreciate. Dinim, that's the acquired taste. To understand how HaKadosh Baruch Hu, legislated things, made rules, but those rules make definitions and make categories and make colors and shapes and different functions that makes the diversified world that we have. When we learn to appreciate the goodness in din, that's the real goodness. That's the hidden light. That's the acquired taste that we need to have. And when we see that even the dinim are a chesed and a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right, that's the level that will be apparent when that hidden light is revealed. Right? Be'ezrat Hashem b'mehera b'yameinu. Right? Right? But the point that I'm getting to is that, that which feels unappreciated, that which you don't appreciate, to you it feels like din. And you know what? It probably is din because it has its unique programming that makes it so hard to appreciate. You have to develop a taste for it, right? But that follows through. That means deep down, it's super good. So I want to start with Haruge Beitar, right? And then we're going to work to marriage. And then you understand why marriage is, the way it is, right? Right. Haruge Beitar. Right? They were able to see the chesed within the din. It was a terrible tragedy, right? But then, if a tragedy is, as we say, just pure loss, right? Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu wouldn't have done this tremendous miracle that the corpses didn't decompose and they were zocheh subsequently to kvura, and that God was showing a sign that even the dinim are for our own good. It's not vengeance, right? It's because we needed it, because sadly it was necessary. And He sent us a sign by showing that even within this tragedy there was divine grace. And that's where they understood Hatov v'Ametiv, the special double good. Because Tov, which is the Tov that we know, the Tov that's easy to appreciate, that's just single Tov. Hatov v'Ametiv, the double Tov, that's when you see the goodness that there is even in the dinim. Right? And, the hidden goodness. The hidden goodness is the special deep goodness that you have to build a taste for. Right? And that's the power of the month of Av. Right? So that's what it means also on the month of Av, the Mesei Midbar, right? The generation that was told to perish in the desert, decreed upon them to perish in the desert. They understood that on Tu B'Av, right, on that when we reached the middle of the month of Av, they understood, how it was necessary that this generation could not in any way have made it in the land of Israel, and under the Hanhaga of Moshe Rabbeinu, only though the generation of Yoshua was fit for it. They understood the master plan, right? Some, as we said in the title of Shir, some of the love breathes through. You smell the love, through the din. They're able to appreciate how it had to be this way. There was no other way. It was for our benefit, being that things worked out the way they worked out. This was the only way forward. Right? But now we come to marriage. Right? We said on these 2 days, right, they overturned halachot, right, that that kept the tribes separate. And they found a way to overturn these halachot, right, legitimately. Right? They found a remez in the psukim, right, that legitimately found that it was only temporary, it wasn't meant to be forever. And we asked the question, so why the tribalism to begin with? If you ultimately want the tribes to intermarry, why'd you set up the tribalism to begin with? So there's an interesting Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. Right? Mishnah everyone knows. Machloket shi l'shem shamayim sofa likayim. If a people disagree, but it's l'shem shamayim, that machloket will endure. It won't be resolved. Like the machloket Hillel and Shammai, as opposed to the machloket Korach v'Chol Adato, right? That that it got resolved pretty quickly. Because, Korach got swallowed up. It's the end of the dispute. It's over, right? And Hillel and Shammai, we're learning Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai until this very day, right? Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. There's such a thing as machloket. There's divergence. L'shem Shamayim explains the Maharal. If God would have only created one thing, that's not the glory of God. He can only create one thing. He's a specialist. He only do one thing. The fact that God could create such a diverse world that even has in it the mutually exclusive, the fire and the water, the spiritual and the physical, that's the greatness of God. That shows that He is Kol Yachol, truly of infinite ability. That if God wanted to show us His glory, that we could appreciate Him, and be Nen and Miziv Ashchina, so He wanted to do something really impressive. And that's creating different things that are different from each other. It should be machloket. They are different, they diverge from each other, but l'shem shamayim, for the sake of God displaying His glory and His infinite ability, and with that, and we get tremendous pleasure seeing that, enjoying that hasaga, right? That comprehension about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It gives us a dveikut to His infinite ability, realizing His infinite ability. So making things bedafka different, right? Right, is l'shem shamayim, right? A God showing all the amazing different things that He can do. And that's why there are 12 tribes of Israel, connected to 12 months of the year, that Am Yisrael has to represent in a microcosm all the diversity that there is in the Bria. How did we start off? As 70 people. B'shivim nefesh yodu avsech Mitzrayim, right? Yaakov came to Mitzrayim with 70, right? 70 people. Wasn't a coincidence. The pasuk says in Parshat Ha'azilu, Yatsev gvulot amim lemispar b'nei Yisrael. God divided up the nations by the door haflaga. Gvulot amim lemispar b'nei Yisrael. God made them 70 nations, knowing that in the future Yaakov would have 70 kids. It's a pasuk. It's not even a medrash. It's a pasuk. Yatsev gvulot amim lemispar b'nei Yisrael. Right? Because that's the secret of Shivim Panim La Torah. Every nation has its own his own headspace, their own culture, their own way of looking at things. Right? The original 70. I mean, some of that are in the UN are just not even worth mentioning. Right? But the original 70, 70 different angles to an issue. Right? And Am Yisrael has all of them. That's why we start off with 70 members. And not only that, where do we have 70? In the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin is 70, not of course there's 70 members of the big Grand Rabbinical Court. We add one, that should be a tiebreaker, so it's 71. But it's Shivim connected, the Shivim Panim LaTorah connected, the 70 nations. Am Yisrael, which is God's people, we reflect all the diversity that there is in the Bria. That's why 2 Jews, 3 opinions, right? That's right. It's that's our job. There's so much diversity amongst us, and it's all l'shem shamayim, right? But of course, all that diversity has to come together. And that's another Mishnah of us. Knesia she l'shem shamayim sof l'iskayim, an ingathering. If it's l'shem shamayim, it could endure, as opposed to the Migdal Bavel. It wasn't l'shem shamayim, that's why it dispersed. Right? That means shem shamayim is what divides us. Shem shamayim is what comes and reunites us. Right? We should be 12 separate tribes, l'shem shamayim, but we're also supposed to get back together, l'shem shamayim. Where did that happen? Every year, 3 times a year, in the Beit HaMikdash. All the 12 tribes, there were 12 gates. They all came, each from his unique direction, and they all meet at the temple, which is Hamakom Asher Yivchar Hashem L'Shaken Shmo Sham. It's called that the divine name rests there. That the Shem Shamayim is it's what holds us together. Right, that it shows that our unity is a divine unity. Right, Jews don't get along because they're from the same place with the same culture and the same language. Jews don't get along for that reason, right? Because we're not. We've been Ashkenazim, Sfaradim, Litayim, Hasidim. Right, what makes us one nation is Shem Shemaim, because we just worship the same God. We're totally culturally different, and it was always that way. The Arizal says there were 12 nuschot of tefillah. Every shevet had its own nusach tefillah. And Ashkenaz is the remnants of the nusach tefillah of Shevet Binyamin. And Sfarad is the remnants of the nusach tefillah of Shevet Yehuda. That's what it says in Kitvei Rabbeinu Ha'ari. Right? It was always meant to be that way. There was always supposed to be diversity. Right? And that should be that the unity is not like a shallow unity of because we think alike and we act alike and we live in the same neighborhood. No. The unity should be based on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Only He is going to be what holds the Jewish people together. Because they all worship Him, and that'll be what binds us together. Means our Achdut is actually a revelation of divine power. Right? So Am Yisrael is a mini universe that think about this. God's universe. He created a lot of different things, and yet the cosmologists are mystified how the cosmic forces don't cancel each other out. Right? Fire and water, there are all types of opposing. There's diversity, and it's one universe, and still, even though it's one universe, the forces don't negate each other. Everything like holds together, the fire and the water, right? It holds together as a united universe without the things negating each other. It's amazing. It's Machloka l'Shem Shamayim and Knessia l'Shem Shamayim, and Am Yisrael is supposed to be a microcosm of all that. And that's why there should be tribes, and initially the tribes should be separate, and that's din, like we said, everything in its definition, and then pulling it all together, and you come to an Achdut that's not based on shallow reasons, it's an Achdut that's based on pure divine power. We could unite these different pieces because we all serve the same God, and that's the fiber that binds the Jewish people together, right? Not secular nationalism and not cultural likeness, because we don't have that, right? It never was based on that, right? So initially apart and then held together by divine unity. In small, that's marriage. Zachar and Nekeva, right? It could not have been more different than each other, right? And it's supposed to be that way, really. Very different, How do I say? Men from Mars and women from Venus, right? Did I get it right? Is that correct? Right. It's really different universes, right? But, it's not, not at all the same and shouldn't be the same Purposely different, right? And the difference between Zachar and Nekeva is totally represented in the differences that we have in between Shamayim and Aretz. Everyone knows that the word Ish has the letter Yud in it. The word Isha has the letter Hey, right? And everyone knows the famous Gemara in Menachos. Ki b'ka Hashem tzur olam. With the name Ka, Hashem fashioned two worlds. That with the letter Yud, He made the higher worlds, those spiritual worlds. With the letter Hey, He made the lower worlds. Right? And that means that the coming together of Ish v'Isha, he has the Yud and she has A, is like the coming together of heaven and earth. Right, making unity between opposites. But you know that? You know that that's meant to be, because even in the individual human being, there's a soul from heaven and a body from earth. Right? That's the unique role of man, which was handed to Adam Arishon, subsequently given over to Am Yisrael, Besod. What the Pasuk Atem Kuriyim Adam, Chazal say, Atem Kuriyim Adam, Ve'ena Akum Kuriyim Adam. We are the real, heirs to the legacy of Adam. There's to create cosmic unity between opposites, right? So in the individual, it's his neshama and his guf, right? And in the bigger picture, it's Zachar and Nekeva. Different, right? And the unity between them is purely divine because it makes no sense, right? If not, it's hell. And if not, it's hell. It's like what we said about the good that you got to learn to appreciate, and if you don't get the acquired taste, it's hell, right? So Chazal say this: Zachu Shechina Shruya Beineim. If they merit, the divine presence is in between them, because it's what's holding them together. God is holding them together. Lo Zachu Esh Ochaltam, because the Yud from Ish and the Hey from Isha leave, and you're just left with the word Esh, and double fire, like Chorban Abayit, right? Like we say, broken home. That's why the Agadot of Chorban Abayis are Mesachet Gitin. It's like a cosmic divorce. Chorban Abayit, broken home, like we say. So if it works, it's heaven. Literally, heaven. It's with heavenly power. And if it doesn't work, right, it's hell. Right? And that's why. It's because they're so different. And with this, you could understand two Gemarot in Mesachet Brachot. They're mentioned one after the other. It's as if you brought a korban todah, right? You bring a korban toda in exactly the circumstances we've been describing. You got your fat pulled out of the fire. Korban toda, like you were in a sakana, and a Kodesh Baruch Hu, and you felt God's love. Even there was you were in dinim, you were surrounded, there was a judgment against you, God intervened, scooped you out of there. So you bring a korban toda, right? Because you saw the goodness even within the dinim, that there was obviously dinim upon you, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu pulled you out of it. So you say thank you, right? That's what the word toda also means, to admit, like hoda'ah, because there was a sticky situation, but you admit that it was really for the good. You admit that you could easily deny it, but you admit that it's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when in the korban Torah you bring chametz and matzah, you bring opposites, right? Because you admit that it's from God, who could even hold together opposites, and even in the dinim is doing chasadim hidden within the dinim, right? So mesameh chasam v'kala, they're also opposites, says the Maharal, like chametz and matzah. And you admit that it's all from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who could create opposites and pull the opposites together. And that's when you see the chasadim within the dinim, like when you have your fat pulled out of the fire. Whenever a nace happens to you, when a nace happens to you, that's exactly what was going on. You were in terrible danger, and something, right? You see the chasadim within the dinim, right? You see the opposites, the chesed with the din, and that's like the zachar within the nekeva. But then there's another one. It's like you rebuild the ruins of Jerusalem. Because in of Bin Yerushalayim, you should know that the Mishkan, the Beit HaMikdash, was a microcosm of the whole universe. And the way that we built the Mishkan, built it, and every component represents something else in the cosmos. Right, the Mishkan and the Mikdash represented the whole universe, and the way we build it is like putting all the cosmic forces in unison. And that's where over there it's Makom of Shem Shamayim that holds it all together. Makes things special, Machloka Shem Shamayim, makes things unified, Knesiyah Shem Shamayim, and that's how Makom Asher Yivchar Hashem L'Shaken Shmo Sham. Right? And it's still that way also in the Zachar and the Teva together. That's why it's called a Beit HaMikdash. It's called a Bayit. Beito zu ishto. We find throughout Chazal. Your wife is called your home. This is called God's home. He's like the husband, Am Yisrael, that built the home for him, made his home for him. We're like his wife. That's the cosmic unity. Right? Right? And then with this you can understand something. What the famous Chazal, everyone knows, that a empress asked one of the Tanaim, what is God doing ever since He created the world? He says, Mizavek Zivugim. He's making shidduchim. He says, I could do that too, right? Right? So she lined up all her avadim and all her shfachot, all her servants and maid servants. Right? Bas Ploni Leploni, right? And the next day they came up, this guy has his eye missing, this woman has her, right? Didn't last one night, the marriage. Right? But it's interesting, he said to her, if you think it's easy, to him, it's kasher kriyat yamsuf. To God, it's as difficult as kriyat yamsuf. Well, what's the kesher? Right? So, of course, in the end, she admitted. Right? But, what's the dialogue? What's he doing since created the world? He's making zivugim. I could do that. No, well, you think it's easy? To him, it's kasher kriyat yamsuf. What's kriyat yamsuf have to do with anything? The idea is like this. During the 6 days of creation, God made all the different cosmic forces. What's been happening ever since then is to pull the forces together in different combinations. And that's what it means. He's mezaveg zivugim. Right? We see what's technology. All these forces were ever there since creation. But we're finding ways to combine these forces in all these neat contraptions. Harness and pull together. All these, as opposed to how they were just left separate. And that's what still is being done. This tikkun of the Bria is called zivugim. Right, to pull the different forces of creation together in different combinations and permutations that create what we call, on the simplest level, it's called technology. All the contraptions that we're inventing. Right, but in Ruchaniyut, it's called that the kochot that HaKadosh Baruch Hu set up are now supplementing each other and improving each other by being supplemented. It's all called zivugim. Right, the whole mitzias of the tikkun of the cosmos is called one big shidduch. Right, and that's an amazing thing. That it's dinim, because din is what makes things separate, everything in its gvul, everything in its boundary, everything with its unique definition, and then you're pulling everything, with everything being special and separate, pulling it together in interesting combinations, right? And then you see how good din is, that chesed is that simple kind, that simple goodness. It's not an acquired taste. The goodness that's in dinim, that's the surprise. That's the higher realization, right? So, Kriyat Yam Suf. So first I'll tell you an interesting word from my Rosh Hashiva, Yaakov Weinberg, Zecher Tzaddik V'Karsh Livracha. He said that he said a very interesting pshat al pi physics, right? What it means that Zivug of Shalom is Kriyat Yam Suf, right? That we're taught in physics, the idea of the equilibrium of energy, right? For every action, there is a reaction of equal force, right? So therefore, right, the type of force that you need to put two separate things together is the same force that it takes to separate a pure oneness. And that's what it means. It's kosher kekriyas yamsuf, right? To bring two separate people together is the same power necessary like ripping the ocean, which is a pure oneness, apart, right? Right, but to go one step deeper, everyone knows that by Kriyat Yam Suf there was a kitrug, right? The angels that prosecuted against Am Yisrael and said, "Halol of the Avodah Zarah, halol of the Avodah Zarah. Why give preferential treatment to the Jews? They serve idols." Hey, what happened in Egypt a week earlier? The angels were quiet. Angels were quiet, right? HaKadosh took us out of Mitzrayim and did Makat Bechorot, right? But by Kriyas Yam Suf, V'amayim Choma, out to Choma, Chema, there was divine anger there, as a word. It was a presence of anger. Right? The idea is like this, right? When Yetziat Mitzrayim on the night of Pesach was pure chesed. It was pure chesed. Memtat Sharei Tumah, HaKadosh took us out anyway. But that's not special. What's special is to deserve it. Din is what makes things special. It makes it that it's deserved. It's coming to you. You have it by right, and that's what makes you different from a goy. Chesed, there's no difference between Jew and goy. Pure kindness. You do pure kindness for everybody. Din is what makes things special, that he deserves and he doesn't. The madrega of Kriyat Yam Suf was that, that's what the angel said. All right, now, do they really deserve it? And that's the miracle of Kriyat Yam Suf that made it bigger, 5 times greater than Yetziat Mitzrayim, like the Haggadah says, Kamalakum Mitzrayim, Esra al Yam Chamishim. Without getting into why the number 5, I don't have time for that right now, but it has to do with the fact that you have 5 separate fingers on your hand, right? Getting into the details, right? Getting into the details, right? But it's more than that, right? But that's the idea of Kriyat Yam Suf is that, Am Yisrael is different, right? Am Yisrael is different. We are different from the Goyim. We are different. And just like man and woman are different. Kriyat Yam was clarified that there are differences, right? There are differences in the Bria, and Am Yisrael is truly different from the Goyim. That was clarified by Kriyas Yam Suf. That's why the angels were able to prosecute there, because are we really different? That real difference is bedin, right? And that's it. Man and woman are really different, right? And like Kriyas Yam Suf clarified how we're really different from each other, and even though really different, still HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts them together, because that shows the divine unity, the divine power that's holding the world together. It's still a mystery to cosmologists today. What holds the universe together? They talk about gluons that they haven't seen. Dark matter, gluons. What's holding it all together? Everything should be pulling in its own direction. Shem Shamayim is pulling it together. And that Shem Shamayim is revealed with the unity of man and woman together. Zachu Shechina Shruya B'neihem. Right? And that is what's revealed with Binyan Beit HaMikdash on earth. You see the Shechina there. Because Binyan Beit HaMikdash represents all the powers of the cosmos converging to that one point in the Beit HaMikdash. And that's where you see the divine name that holds the whole cosmos together. And that's what the month of Av is really all about. It's about revealing the hidden divine name. And that's why, on the month of Tu B'Av, when we reach the center of the month, even though currently it's a month of Din, seemingly without seeing the Chesed yet, we believe in it, and that's why we don't say Tachanun to it. We believe in it. We hear about it. Otet B'Shmiya. We hear about it, right? We don't see it, but still, the month of Av is the month of Av, and its innate power comes out in the middle of the month on Tu B'Av. And on Tu B'Av, some of the love breathes through. All the higher chasadim that are behind the dinim seeps out a little bit. You could feel it, right? And that's, and the goodness of seeing the good in the din and understanding how the din is for our benefit. So the fact that they're separate tribes, that's not a bad thing. It's not to create machloket. There's a way for that diversity to get together and create a greater whole, which a whole that has all these different colors and all this great unification of the great name, that so many different things could come together under the same God. The different tribes, Shevet Binyamin with the other tribes, men and women in general, right? The differences between them is, and they're supposed to be different, and they're designed different, and they should not be the same, and they shouldn't, and separate restrooms for sure, right? Separate. That's the unity. That's the greatness of the divine unity, right? That only God is what holds it together. Right? So that's a little bit of what Tu B'Av is. Now on Yom Kippur, is when we actually feel it, because on this day, Yom Kippur is the great day of reconciliation, right? It's a great day of reconciliation. We do tshuva and our sins. We do tshuva me'ava avonotav nasol keskuyot, right? We convert everything bad into good, right? There's one of the famous Hasidic masters, Rav Simcha Ber Pershischa, used to say, if I could, I would abolish all the fast days, except for 2 days, Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. Right? Tisha B'Av, because how can you eat? Basically, how can you eat? Yom Kippur, you don't need to eat, right? Right? Because the body and soul are reconciled, If you do it right, you're not supposed to feel hungry on Yom Kippur. Right? The body and soul are reconciled. They're in perfect unity. Right? So on Yom Kippur, it's like a day of Latid Lavo, where you're by mamish living in the future. Right? And that's why it's a day of pure spirit and no eating and no drink, because you're like living in the future. You're like living in Olam Haba in your own time. Tu B'Av, is, we're still, in this world, but a little bit of that hidden goodness bleeds through. Right? And as a sign that we feel that HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't really divorce us with Tisha B'Av. It's just the opposite. It was too good for us to appreciate. And it's yet going to be the day when, the month when we're going to have our great reunification with Him, where the base of Mikdash that will never be destroyed will be built, B'mehera B'yameinu, right? Right? And with the Tu B'Av being the finality of the Chanukah Tabayit, right? As we explained, right? So we could even feel it Bizman Hazeh. And that's why it's a time, it's a, the Ari Kadosh says that there are 12 permutations of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. And they're connected the 12 months a year. You work it out in your head. Now, there's 12 ways to spell Yud Kei Vav Kei, because, 2 letters are the same. So, there's only 12 permutations, not 16. Right? So, 12. The permutation for the month of Av is Havaya, which is the one word we're allowed to say. You know why we're allowed to say that? That's here if we're allowed to say. Because it has a profane meaning. It means existence. It also means marriage. Like the Gemara says, Makish Havaya Liyitzia. Right? Compare Kiddushin to, right? Havaya. Right? So it has a profane meaning, so we're allowed to say it. But think about this for a second. Think about it. It has a profane meaning, that's why we're allowed to say it. That means that this divine name is the most hidden name. We can't see the divinity. It has like a Pashup Pshat that's not divine. But what is that Pashup Pshat? Existence itself, Havaya. Marriage. Right? So again, illustrating the point, right, that the hidden goodness is the greatest goodness, and the greatest goodness, the greatest chesed behind creation, because there's dinim in creation. But the dinim in creation is for the purpose of getting to the higher goodness. That's an acquired taste, inside which we have to work for, right? And this higher goodness is the power of unity that comes out with every Jewish marriage of Zachu, Shechina, Shuriya, B'neiim. So, Rebbe should help. I guess I have to start tonight because I screamed at my wife a great deal on the way here because, frustration. GPS wasn't working, right? But, but everyone, we have to take upon themselves Tu B'Av, right? We have to realize that our marriages, that's our little remnant of the Beit HaMikdash. It's our little Zachu Shechina Shruya B'neiim. Ham Sameach Chasam V'Kala Kilu Bana Achas Mechorvas Yerushalayim. Right? So, and that's why you can understand why Chazal were so makpid on Shalom Bayis. Right? You have enough money just to either buy candles for Shabbos or wine for Kiddush. Which one do you buy?
Wine for Kiddush.
You want to vote on it?
Wine for Kiddush.
Shalom Bayis.
Candles. Shalom bayis.
We can say Kiddush but with the bread.
What? Right. Right, but even if you have, that's it, you only have like 1 penny, just you take the candle. You take the candle, mishum shalom bayis. Right? All right, because there's nothing worse than groping the door and banging into each other's, whatever. That's not shalom bayit. That's what the Gemara says, mishum shalom bayit. And there's so many halachot that Chazal gave us, mishum shalom bayit. Right? What?
That's why we put 2 candles.
That's right, 2 candles. But you have it, even 1, because nothing worse than, in the darkness and just, you have to remember, in their days, when nighttime was like absolute, no street lights, nothing, dark was like, banging into walls, mamish. So it's like hell, right? So that's why, no, really, that's why, you have to realize that in their days, you lived in darkness at night. Mamish lived in darkness. So it's hard for us to illustrate, the why, because bisman hazeh, so let's just say halacha l'maaseh bisman hazeh, you have the electric light that you could turn on l'chvod Shabbat, right? If you really don't have candles, and therefore you would buy the wine because you have the electric light. And so in their days, you didn't have the electric light, and there were no street lights that come in through the shutters or nothing. Now, you lived in absolute blackness. That's hell. Bang, 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 bang. So mishum shalom bayit, right? Right? You have to have the candle, and the Rambam, when he says halacha, says, and also if it has to be a Shabbos candle or a Chanukah, Ner Chanukah, also Shabbos candle, mishum shalom bayit, right? Nothing more important shalom bayit, because as the Rambam ends up, because the whole derech of Torah is derech derech shalom. What does shalom actually mean? Right, peace. But what's the root of the word? Shalem, whole. Right, that you pull all the different pieces together. Real peace is not, hey, if we think alike and we act like that, that's not peace. That's not peace. That's just not fighting. Right? No, shalom is that, no, I don't think the way you think, and you don't think the way I think, and still we get together. That's shalom. And that's called shleimut, because since we're different, we're supplementing each other. I'm going to give you something you don't have, that's why it's shleimut. And that's why Shmo Sha'akadosh Baruch Hu Shalom. It's one of the divine names, because real shalom is when there are opposites and differences, and they still are held together by the pure divine power. We should help with at least on this day. First of all, Chazak is taking on to solve the Shidduch crisis, right? Yaniv is in charge, right? And Chazak is taking on to Shalom Bayis workshops, right? And which improve their shalom bayit, right? Because this is our the last vestige of the Beit HaMikdash in our private lives. I mean, in public life we have the Beit HaKnesset, which is the Mikdash Ma. That's in the communal. In our private lives, our last vestige is our marriages. We should help. We should have that and to the extent that we're marbe shalom in our own households and help others build their households. So Adir Yivne Beito Bekarov Bimhera B'Yamein.